You know, some stories don't start with monsters hiding under the bed. Sometimes, the monsters walk straight through the front door, smiling, acting like family. This story begins after a long, bitter divorce. A mother, exhausted and broken after 25 years with a manipulative husband, tries to rebuild her life. She wanted comfort, love, a second chance, and that's when he appeared, Chris. Chris wasn't like her ex-husband. He was charming in his own odd way. He had this way of making people feel like he understood them. My mom, she fell for it, and we, her children, didn't want to break her fragile hope, so we let him in. But Chris had a past, one that should have been a red flag. He was a former inmate, locked up for a DUI. He swore he'd changed. My mom wanted to believe that. And us kids, we just wanted peace in the house after years of chaos. At first, things seemed fine. Chris and I even bonded over video games. My brother kept his distance, my sister tried to stay polite, and Mom seemed happy. But happiness can be an illusion, and illusions always crack. That's when the shadows began to crawl out from behind Chris's smile. One day, Chris went to one of his routine probation checkups at the courthouse. Hours passed. He never came back. Mom was pacing, worried. We got a phone call, not from the courthouse, not from a friend, but from Texas. Chris had been arrested. Turns out his family back in Texas was tied to gang activity, drug deals, dangerous circles, and Chris, whether guilty or just unlucky, had been caught in their net. He cut a deal with the FBI. He'd testify against his family in exchange for a lighter sentence. That should have been enough for Mom to walk away, but love makes people blind. Over a year of phone calls, letters, promises whispered through collect calls, they planned a future. She even planned a marriage with him. And when Chris returned, he came back with a smile. He got his old job back as a Dairy Queen manager. For a while, it looked like maybe, just maybe, things would finally settle. But then, the drinking started. Chris was no stranger to alcohol, but this was different. He drank every night, 6 beers, 10, sometimes half a case before the night was over. And with every drink, he changed. His words cut sharper, his laughter turned meaner, and his eyes stayed too long on things they shouldn't. He never hit us. No, Chris was smarter than that. His weapon was silence that lasted for days, or sudden outbursts that shattered the air. He'd corner my brother with cruel words, mocking him for not being man enough. He'd pressure me, test my patience, trying to break me. But the worst was how he treated my sister. He never touched her, not really, but sometimes that's not the point. Sometimes it's the way someone looks, the way their jokes are just a little too sharp, too personal. The way his eyes lingered when she walked into the room, making her fold her arms tighter across her chest. Every time she laughed, he had a comment. Every time she left the house, he wanted to know where, when, why. My sister stopped bringing friends over. She stopped smiling as much. And Mom, she brushed it off. "He's just stressed," she'd say. "Don't take it personally." But we felt it, the tension, the unease, the way the air changed when Chris was in the room. It was like living with a storm cloud, dark, heavy, and always threatening to explode. And then, one night, it did. Chris stumbled in past midnight, reeking of beer. Mom was waiting for him, tired of excuses. The fight was loud, his voice slurred, hers cracked. And when she asked if he'd been drinking, he just laughed. He didn't even bother lying. That night, she kicked him out. For the first time in years, the house felt lighter, quiet, free. But that peace lasted less than 24 hours, because the next morning, there was a knock at the door. And standing there was Betty, a girl I'd gone to high school with, Chris's coworker. And she had a secret that would shatter everything. Betty stood in the doorway, her face pale, her hands shaking. She asked to speak to my mom privately, but Mom insisted we stay. "If this is about Chris," she said, "we all deserve to know." Betty sat down, lowered her voice, and told us everything. Chris wasn't just drinking. He wasn't just being cruel. He was cheating with a woman named Darla. Betty's voice trembled as she explained how she'd walked in on them more than once, how Chris would lock himself in the Dairy Queen's office, bringing Darla with him, how the two of them thought the store was their playground. And then, the final blow, Darla was pregnant. For a moment, the room froze. It felt like all the air had been sucked out. My mom's face went white. My sister pressed her hands together so tight her knuckles turned red. My brother clenched his jaw. And me? I just stared at the floor, because I knew. I knew deep down this wasn't just cheating. This was an unraveling. Chris had confessed to Betty once, bragging that he was glad Darla was pregnant, because at least she's giving me what your mom couldn't. Those words, venomous and cruel, now burned in my mother's mind. She didn't cry, not then. She didn't scream. She simply stood up, walked to Chris's closet, and started pulling out his things. "Throw it all out," she said. We carried his clothes, his games, his belongings, every trace of him, out into the alley. A lifetime of junk dumped like garbage. My sister's hands shook as she tossed the last box. My brother muttered under his breath, "Good riddance." That evening, Mom called Chris. Her voice was steady, almost cold. She confronted him, and he didn't deny a thing. He admitted it all. He even sounded proud. "I'll finally have a child of my own," he said, "something you could never give me." Those words cut deeper than knives. But what Chris didn't know was that he had made the mistake of messing with the wrong family. Because if Mom was too broken to fight back, we weren't. The first step was his job. Dairy Queen might have been his pride, but it was also his weakness. We contacted the franchise owner, a family friend, and we told him everything. The cheating, the threats to Betty, the sexual acts on company property. Within days, Chris was fired, banned from every branch the owner controlled. Betty, the very woman he threatened, was promoted into his role. We thought that would be enough, but Chris was stubborn. He slithered back into Darla's arms, in a small town an hour away, found another Dairy Queen job, started over, or so he thought, because we found out, and once again, we called the new owner. This time, it took longer. Chris was careful not to repeat his mistakes, but eventually, he lost that job too. Without income, without stability, Chris started circling back to our neighborhood, driving past our home, watching, waiting. There was just one problem. Chris didn't have a license. Because of his DUI, his probation had never been lifted. For years, he depended on Mom, on us, to drive him around. Now, with no one to help him, he had no choice but to risk it. We recognized Darla's car, a beat-up sedan that didn't belong in our street. And each time we saw it, Chris was behind the wheel. So we called the police. We told them who was driving. We told them about his probation. And one night, flashing lights lit up our block. Chris was pulled over, arrested, back to jail. But it didn't end there, because when the police searched Darla's home, they found guns. Illegal for a felon like Chris. More charges, more jail time. By the time he was processed, it was too late. He was already being sent back to Texas to face his trial. And that's when things turned truly eerie. Letters started arriving, dozens of them, from prison. Chris wrote to Mom constantly, begging her to forgive him, telling her he'd changed. Some letters were full of rage, blaming her for ruining his life. Others were filled with twisted love notes, asking her to take him back, sometimes all in the same letter. Mom never read them aloud. She burned each one in the fireplace, her face unreadable. But my sister told me something strange. She said that once, before Mom burned the letters, she caught a glimpse of the handwriting. And it wasn't all Chris's. Some of the notes looked like they'd been written by a woman. The letters didn't stop. Every week, another envelope. Each one filled with scribbled apologies, twisted promises, and rambling threats. Mom burned them all, or so we thought. One night, I woke up thirsty. The house was quiet, except for the faint creak of the floorboards downstairs. When I peeked into the living room, I froze. Mom was sitting by the fireplace, but instead of burning a letter, she was holding one. Her eyes moved quickly across the page, and then she smiled. A strange, secret smile. Before I could step away, I noticed something else. The handwriting. The first half of the letter was Chris's messy scrawl, but the bottom half? Neater, softer. A woman's hand. And in that moment, a thought struck me like lightning. What if Mom wasn't just reading these letters? What if she was writing back? Over the next few weeks, things grew strange. Mom would disappear late at night. She claimed she was visiting a friend, but her excuses were always shaky. My sister found hidden phone bills, late-night collect calls from the prison. And once, when I accidentally opened one of Mom's drawers, I found a stack of letters, not burned, not destroyed, saved, tied together with a ribbon. We didn't want to believe it, not after everything Chris had done to us, not after the drinking, the cheating, the cruelty, but the evidence was there. Mom was keeping in touch with him. The eerie feeling in the house grew heavier by the day. One evening, while setting the table, my brother said it out loud. She still loves him. The words hung in the air like smoke. None of us denied it. And then came the final twist. Weeks later, the phone rang. Mom answered, her voice soft, almost tender. "Yes, I miss you too." We all knew who was on the other end. That night, I followed her. She drove 2 towns over, stopping at a quiet roadside motel. She checked in under a false name. My heart pounded as I waited in the shadows. And then, I saw him. Chris, out of jail, out on early release, standing there, smiling at her like nothing had ever happened. And Mom, our Mom, ran into his arms. She kissed him. Not the kiss of anger, not the kiss of someone seeking revenge. No, it was the kiss of a lover. Everything spun. My head, my chest, the ground beneath my feet. The betrayal cut deeper than anything Chris had ever done. Because Mom hadn't just forgiven him. She had chosen him. After all the misery, after all the broken pieces, after all the suffering he inflicted on us, she had gone back. But here's the part that still chills me, the part that makes my skin crawl even now. When Mom returned home later that night, her face was calm, her voice steady. She tucked us in as though nothing had happened, smiled at us like she always did, as if she hadn't just betrayed her own children. But in her eyes, there was something new, a secret she would never admit, but one we could all feel. Chris was back. Mom was with him. And we were trapped in their story now. Because in this house of secrets, betrayal, and eerie shadows, one question still lingers. One question that keeps me awake at night. Did Mom fall victim to Chris's manipulation again? Or was she always part of it? Give your opinions in comment box. Thanks for watching.